So today we start with the second chapter of Guyton. In this chapter, we'll be looking at the physiology. In fact, firstly, we'll looking at the functional anatomy and physiology. Welcome back. This is the first half of this chapter. Not half really, one third. The rest of the two thirds will be dedicated to vestibular apparatus, the sensations that it carries, and the maintenance of equilibrium that it helps establish. So again, first half is descending motor system, descending tracts as opposed to the ascending tracts that you will be doing in sensory physiology. And the second part is vestibular apparatus and its functions. Okay? Right. So this is the summary of the. Let's delve into this. So firstly, if I am not mistaken, this is from Guyton, while this is from Ganong. Okay. Let's look at Guyton first. I like this the final common pathway that he mentioned. So look at this. This is the final common pathway. Okay. Which basically means the motor neuron in the ventral horn and the nerve that comes out of it and supplies the muscle which it's supposed to contract. Okay, so this is the final common pathway. So on this neuron lies a lot of responsibility on this alpha or gamma motor neuron in the ventral horn, and you see that all of the descending pathways basically converge on the spinal cord and either directly end on the ventral horn neuron, which is not shown here, of course, and or the interneurons which surround this ventral neuron. Okay, so I'll tell you now that lesser fibers, lesser descending fibers, lesser descending motor fibers directly interact with the ventral motor neuron. Most of them end in the interneurons which surround the this whole pool of neurons. Okay, is this clear? ठीक. Now, I'm not sure if I've mentioned earlier that in CNS, overviews are very important. And this is one of those overviews, okay? So I gave a lot of importance in my class, in my live classes, and hence this class as well, on the overviews. Look, most of the CNS, we don't really understand the details of it, like in kidney, like in respiration or circulation or heart, nerve and muscle, where we know our way around how the system works. We know the details. With CNS, mostly we know what happens. In some cases, we don't even know what is happening. But even in the stuff that we know that happens, we don't know the why, the how. Okay. From that perspective, the summaries, the overall bird eye view becomes very important to have some sense of direction in what is being discussed. Okay, so in this way, I give some special emphasis to summaries and overviews in CNS physiology, generally speaking. So, if you want to understand what is happening to the ventral motor neuron in terms of its inputs, okay, we know the output. The output is the nerve and the message that it sends out to the muscle. However, the influences that act on it from the higher centers. This is a very good schematic diagram for that. Okay, so you can see that. Let's take it from the top. Cerebral cortex itself, in coordination with a thing called basal ganglia. So this is the cerebral cortex, the basal ganglia, and the thalamus. If you can see, there's a troika. There's a troika going on. Look at the arrows. Cerebral cortex to basal ganglia to thalamus, thalamus to cerebral cortex back. Okay, so this is a troika. Now, with this, you can see that cerebellum is here also. So cerebellum has a part to play It's a busy place, cerebellum is. Brainstem is super busy, okay? And you can see the arrows now. So, cerebellum extensively coordinates with thalamus, it coordinates extensively with brainstem, and vice versa. And then you also see cerebral cortex directly dealing with brainstem and vice versa. Welcome back. I was commenting on this arrow. This can be a feedback loop and the sensory ascending system or signal messages from the sensory receptors, the so-called ascending tracts. Okay. So this again is a very busy place. There's a lot of coordination to and fro, back and forth amongst these structures. Then brainstem coordinates with spinal cord. Let me clear that. So you see that when it comes to spinal cord, and hence our neuron of interest, cerebral cortex can access it in two ways. Okay, one is this direct way, this arrow here, and one is via its effects on the brainstem, and the brainstem then coordinates with spinal cord. Okay, so one is, you can imagine that this is a more straight direct contact, the other is through the busy business center called brainstem, and then you have it. Okay, however, the final point is the motor neuron and then the nerve that it carries to the muscle. Okay, so if you were to contract a muscle or muscles, which is mostly the case, usually in complex movements is defined as contraction of more than a couple of muscle groups for more than 5 seconds. Okay, for any such complex movement to take place here, there are lots of planning and executions in the higher centers. Okay, now what exactly is the sequence of that process? This is a very good diagram for that. At this point, I will ask you if you have questions on this explanation, please. Yes, it should be clear now. Okay. Okay. Now, this is a very good diagram in the sense that it gives you the functional overview of the entire motor system and the main players in it. And Ganong is Ganong. It goes into details even in this diagram, this overview diagram. So look at how he describes the motor movement. Okay, movement being this, and the start is the idea. Okay, so he divides it into the plan and the execution. So the structures that are involved in planning of the movement. Okay, and then these are the structures which are involved in execution of the movement. Do you understand the scheme of this diagram? Yes? Okay. I need to hear from more people now. Okay, we are going deep into this overview. I will need some sort of evidence that people are with the program. Okay. Chalo. ठीक. Okay, good. Still, point of concern is about 60 people from second year. The rest, Allah knows where are they, why don't they join these classes. I hope they're looking at the recorded things. Anyhow, so first we talk about the plan. Okay, so there's an idea. Let me get up and go to sleep, or let me get up, help somebody, or take a walk, or take a run or a jog. And these days cycling is very, very preferable in youngsters. So all of these things, they are basically motor movements, if you realize, right? You're not looking at the psychology of this, we are looking at the physiology, the motor physiology aspect. Okay, so these ideas that we want, these things that we want to do, the motor component we are talking about. So the idea is the first thing that comes to mind. Okay, when I say mind now, I want to say the parts of the brain that deal with ideas, thinking, frontal cortex. Okay, that sets us apart from other mammals. Okay, so the idea comes, and the idea is processed. Welcome back. The question that Varda asked is, I think from this. This is, let me confirm the question. You are talking about this, right? That cerebral cortex has a direct connection with spinal cord and then indirect connection through the brainstem. Am I right? This is your question? Hello, Varda. Okay, so there are two things, beta. One thing is, sometimes in some things, very fine movements are required. Okay, in very fine movements where there is precision involved, say, especially in the movement of the distal flexors, especially the hands, the fingers, right? Uh, Direct control means that the CNS directly wants to control the movement, and it does not want any intermediates, any agents in between. Okay, so the 10 to 20% fibers that actually come directly from the cortex and end up on the motor neuron, they are dedicated to those movements which require extreme precision. Okay, and the CNS invests in them such that there is no signal loss. So whatever is conceived at the cerebral cortex, the entire signal is transmitted to the motor neurons. If you understand what's happening here. Okay, uh, it's like you're teaching your younger sibling something, a motor skill. Okay, you want to directly supervise them carefully when they are doing a critical part of that motor movement. So cycling, for example. So I assume you would focus most in the initial part when he or she is trying to ride a bike, and the balance aspect of it, so that he doesn't fall down. That's the critical part. That's where you want to go direct. Okay, and this is an example. Okay, but then when he or she starts to maintain balance, and they're still wobbly on the bike, but still they're doing something, would like to say maybe look here and there, and maybe not so particular supervision is involved, and you can maybe look around and do your own thing, chat on the mobile while keeping an eye on the kid, and so on and so forth. So in other non-critical or not so heavily critical motor movements, what the CNS does is starts the ball rolling by an initial firing up of motor neurons directly, and then through maintenance discharge, it basically takes the help of its subordinates. Okay, I hope it gives you some sense of this direct and indirect approach. Okay, Vardhan? Okay, let's go back to the Ganong diagram. Fine. So we were talking about the idea, okay, the idea that came to your mind, then it's processed in the cortical association areas. Remember, the idea is an idea, okay. The whole point of planning is to dissect or divide this idea into possible. This is important, guys, okay. because eventually a movement is supposed to be a movement is supposed to take place. So idea needs to translate into a physical movement. Okay, idea is not when it's conceived. It's not a set of commands to a muscle. It's just an idea. Let's take a walk. That's an idea, right? Now, taking a walk requires a lot of sophisticated descending motor systems, which control the spinal cord in a certain way, which then controls the discharge of ventral motor neurons to the muscles concerned, which will make taking a walk possible, right? So, the idea of taking a walk, for example, is then firstly looked at by the cortical association areas. We'll be talking about this in a bit. Then they are given to this place called basal ganglia, which we looked at in the Guyton diagram, is a very close associate of the cerebral cortex. These areas are from cerebral cortex. Okay, so they have coordination with basal ganglia. Then lateral cerebellum. So not just cerebellum. Ganong actually mentions lateral cerebellum. Okay, so you have the associates basal ganglia and lateral cerebellum, which help the cortex work out the details of the idea. Okay, maybe break it down into smaller motor components. Okay, and so on and so forth. When these preliminary analysis is done, the thing the thing is then sent to the premotor and motor. So there are two things here: premotor and motor. I think I should. Welcome back. I was here. Okay, and you can see that there is a lot of to and fro motion between premotor and motor area, again of the cortex, and basal ganglia and lateral cerebellum. Okay, so just to give you the emphasis again, the idea is first processed in the cortical association areas of the cortex, cerebral cortex. Okay, so this is cerebral cortex, this is cerebral cortex as well. Okay, however, both of these areas draw from basal ganglia and lateral cerebellum. These are cerebral. This is cerebellum. Up till now, any questions? Okay, chalo. Now, you see that this is right on the boundary. Premotor and motor cortex is on the boundary. Okay, so it has a connection with this world and it has connection with this world, obviously. So whatever happens here in this part, okay, this thing here, the premotor and motor cortex, it is then conveying all of this to the execution branch, okay, through descending tracts and the intermediate cerebellum, right? So once the idea is translated into bits and bytes, smaller doable movements or part of movements by the coordination of all of these components, welcome back, all of that made is then sent to the muscle for movement through the ventral motor neurons. Okay, now once the movement starts happening, you need feedback. These arrows are of feedback. So muscle spindle, Golgi tendon organ, overlying skin and fascia, all of those, joint angulation, okay, proprioception, the whole thing is then sent back to the motor cortex to tell the motor cortex that, hey, this particular signal, is it good, is it accurate, is it getting the job done of taking a walk, for example, or there are issues with it which then is fed back to the premotor and motor cortex. This feedback loop is very important for you to know. Okay, so once movements are done, well, when you read sensory and motor physiology separately, this can be a side effect, that you would say that okay, ascending pathways are one thing and descending pathways are a different thing. While anatomically are different, in physiology, they work together. So maybe there is sensory movement, or sensory, and a sensory event has happened, a pain is on one of your fingers. That's a purely sensory effect, okay, and that will be sent up to the areas, and a motor movement will be initiated, which takes the finger away from the noxious stimulus, right? However, during conscious movements, this is the other way around now. In conscious movements, where you do the movement yourself, okay, and the movement happens, then when the movement happens, sensory data gets generated, which needs to then fed back to the system to tell the system to make necessary adjustments to fine tune the movement. Remember, the initial bits, especially for new movements, new learned movements, are not very accurate. They are a bit clumsy. So if I take the example of your little brother or sister trying to learn how to ride a bike, the initial attempts would be clumsy. The kid would fall down, or even when he'll try to ride the bike, it may not be in one direction, it can be in several directions, okay? But as soon as the feedback starts to come in and rehearsal of the motor movement gets established, then the movement becomes graceful with due course, okay? And the whole thing syncs together. Make sense? Welcome back. Okay, now, in this whole thing, let me just label it so that you understand my emphasis here. This is one thing. This is one area of this diagram, while this is the other. Okay, the blue. I will now describe the blue. Okay, the role of cerebellum in it. Okay, cerebellum is a different topic. It will be discussed in the next chapter once we get there. But you can notice that cerebellum appears in this diagram twice: the lateral cerebellum and the intermediate cerebellum. One way to enhance your learning is whenever you get something new, you try to remember it. So remember that you saw lateral cerebellum under the planning bit of this diagram, and you saw intermediate cerebellum under execution, the doing of the thing. Okay? All right. So let's see the arrows first. So the premotor cortex, when it was transmitting the thing to the muscles, it also sent a copy. Look at this. It also sent a copy to the intermediate cerebellum. Now, interestingly, then three things happen. I'm talking about this arrow here. So a copy of that motor command or motor commands sent to the muscle, a copy of that is sent to the intermediate cerebellum, wherever that is. That's not our concern at the moment. We just know that cerebellum is a place, it's called the hind brain, it's at the back of the brainstem, okay? So a copy of that motor command or commands is sent to the intermediate cerebellum. Then, very peculiarly, intermediate cerebellum does three things. One, it sends its own adjusted copy to the muscles. You can see it here. And the movement sends back a set of sensory data which it was sending. Welcome back. And then based on all of this, coming and going and coming, it gives a feedback back to the motor cerebral cortex. to help even more fine tune its motor movement. This is how intermediate cerebellum helps, augments, assists the cortex in achieving the finesse of the movement, the accuracy of the movement. Questions? Shall we proceed? Last point, Subhan. What last point? Yani, the whole thing about the cerebellum? Okay, quick recap coming up. So, the premotor and motor cortex. Love to see how this is explained in writing under the diagram. Abdullah Javed, I don't understand your comment. Please explain. Articulate your lack of articulation. I got the point about the finesse. Let me just come back to it. Firstly, go on, Abdullah. What do you mean? So, like if we are asked, no. Remember, Abdullah, I don't know if you joined late, but this is a summary slide, okay? This is a summary slide. This is not about cerebellum. It's not about cerebellum. It's about the overall thing of the motor. I mean, this whole diagram here is basically telling you what the entire motor system does with voluntary contractions, voluntary movements, from plan to achieving execution of the movement. And yes, there are two mentions of the cerebellum, which we have just clarified very superficially. Okay, cerebellum is a separate topic. Okay, in the next, it will come in the next chapter. In the next chapter, you have cerebellum and basal ganglia. The whole chapter is dedicated to cerebellum and basal ganglia. Half and half. Okay, so don't worry. You will not be quizzed. Welcome back. As I was saying, each of these entries are basically a chapter of Guyton. So don't worry, we will be going through those details, inshallah. Right? Let me angle on the fin. If you are learning to do a new move as opposed to what you know, so you know how to roll, but do you know to write Chinese or say from writing English, especially the languages which are written from right to left. English is written from left to right. You need to adjust your motor movements to even a language which goes from right to left. Okay, so initially a kid trying to write Urdu or Arabic, language which goes from right to left, as opposed to a language which goes the other way around, it will need adjustment of the fingers. Yes? So initially that movement will be a bit not so fine, okay, a bit clumsy, wobbly. Yeah. Whoever asked this question, please stay with me. Identify yourself, please. Subhan tha? Who was it? Okay, good, Subhan. So you know this, that as you rehearse, that the main thing is rehearse. So let me just type it so that it's emphasized. Where's my keyboard? The key thing is rehearsal. With motor movements, it's about rehearsal. With rehearsal, what happens is, this feedback becomes very accurate. Direct feedback from the muscle and this whole sophisticated feedback through the intermediate cerebellum. Just follow the arrows. Look at this arrow come in your Viva.